For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Business Leadership South Africa Communications Director Themba Maseko discusses the SA recent downgrade. What does the recent credit rating downgrade by S&P mean for our country?
Well, basically it means that we've been relegated to what is known as junk status, which means that it's going to be more expensive for government and government companies like Eskom to borrow money from international funders. So a lot of money that we pay in taxes that goes into government budget, instead of being used to provide services to our citizens, it means that more money will be used to pay the interest on the loans that we have as a country. So it's going to affect the ordinary person in the street in the sense that even people who have credit, who are owing money to banks, we're likely to see interest rates going up, we're likely to see the rate of inflation going up, we're likely to see the price of goods that ordinary citizens buy on a daily basis actually rising. So the cost of living for you and me is going to increase because of this rating. So, and what's unfortunate about it is that it's something that we could have avoided as a nation. These ratings are due to the mistakes that were committed by government at a policy level, and we think that it is, although not unexpected, was surprised, but we're also very unhappy about them.
So what does BLSA think needs to be done to avoid more downgrades?
It's not complicated things that government needs to do largely. It's essentially about government proving to the investment community out there, business, international investors, that the fiscal money that we have as government is being managed properly. In other words, as government, we're not spending more money than we're collecting in taxes. So if you can demonstrate that to the world, that in fact government is not wasting money, there's less corruption, there's policy certainty. So in other words, when government says this is policy for mining, we're not going to be spending money on nuclear, money that we don't have, the credit rating agencies will say these guys know what they're doing. But at this stage, it's a question of the world out there not having confidence in our government's ability to manage the finances. So government has to demonstrate that it can control expenditure and make sure that it doesn't spend more money than it's collecting in taxes. It must make sure that the policies, economic policies, are very clear and certain, and make sure that we demonstrate to the world that we're fighting against corruption. And when those things are in place, the sentiment will turn. Everybody will say this government is on top of managing the public finances.
Is it fair to blame corruption and political instability for the recent downgrade?
Well, they are a major factor. If you look at the statements issued by the rating agencies, they make it very clear that in fact, if the impression they have that there's too much corruption in government, but not only that there's corruption, but nothing is being done to stem corruption in terms of prosecuting those who are responsible for corruption, making sure that there's political stability in the country. In other words, we don't change finance ministers overnight without giving good reasons why those changes are happening. Those are things that have contributed to this downgrade. So this is what we call own goals that have been scored by this government.
President Jacob Zuma recently instructed Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba to identify concrete measures to urgently address challenges that were identified in the medium-term budget policy statement. Is this going to help?
Well, there is a need for urgent action on the part of government to make sure that we demonstrate a very clear plan about how we are going to solve the economic challenges that we're facing as a nation. As far as government is concerned, we are worried as business that on the one hand, we know that we're not collecting enough taxes. On the other hand, government, in an attempt to try and meet the demands of students for free education, demands for many other services from government, the budget requirement is rising, but the ability to raise taxes is actually slowing down, largely because government makes its money from taxes that individuals and companies pay. So if the economy is slowing down, it means that companies won't be able to make enough money so that they can pay tax. It means that individuals are not able to actually get jobs so that they can also contribute to the tax pot that we have as a nation. So it is indeed a complex and very delicate situation that we're facing at this point in time.
Banking Association of South Africa MB Kaskuvadia recently said there was a serious breakdown between business and government. Would you agree? And how can this situation be overcome?
Well, at this point in time, our sense is that there's a trust deficit between government and business, which is really unfortunate because the people who really grow an economy is actually business. What government needs to make sure is that it creates the right environment for business people to say, we now know what the regulations are, we can then invest. At this stage, there isn't enough communication between government and business. The relationship is almost slowing down at a point when we should be working very closely together to make sure that we grow this economy so that we can actually create jobs, deal with inequality, unemployment, and poverty. So at this stage, the relationship is not where it should be. In fact, in times of economic crisis, that's when you should be seeing business leaders and government sitting around the table and saying, what plan can we put on the table to deal with all of these challenges? So at this stage, yes, there is indeed a trust deficit between business and government.
Your organization has reiterated its call for an independent judicial inquiry into state capture. Why do you think that such an inquiry will be helpful?
Well, state capture is something that is one of the reasons why state coffers are actually getting dry as we speak, because it's essential about monies being stolen from the fiscus, from the tax person. And there are so many allegations implicating senior people in government, and we're not seeing any agency on the part of government to say we are investigating all of these allegations. There's been the so-called Gupta leaks, which implicate a lot of politicians, a lot of officials, members of state-owned enterprises, and we're not seeing any investigation being done by either the police, the Hawks, nobody being prosecuted. So we believe that, in fact, this judicial inquiry, which was recommended more than a year ago by the public protector, has not yet happened. We know the president has taken the matter to court, but the issues, the challenge of state capture are so urgent in our view that we think that a judicial inquiry needs to happen as quickly as possible. But prosecutions don't need to wait for the inquiry. We believe that people need to be investigated as we speak without waiting for the judicial inquiry to make sure that people are held accountable.
Do you think the decisions that will be taken during the upcoming 54th ANC elective conference next month can play a vital role in restoring investor confidence?
It's a conference of the ruling party, so we think that it is absolutely vital that the conference takes place and that it does not end up in a chaotic situation that we've seen in other provinces. And there's a direct link between political stability and this conference taking place. Now, we know that if the political or the ruling party gets into a crisis, internal crisis, that's likely to have an impact on the governance in the country. And when there's a governance crisis, it leads to a further economic crisis. You could look at the example, for example, in Zimbabwe, when there were serious problems in the ZANU ruling party pertaining to the president, it led to a collapse of their economy. So the link between a ruling party, governance, and economic growth is very important. And that is why we are hoping that, in fact, the conference does take place and that the delegates who go to the conference make sure that they elect ethical leaders, people who understand the importance of fighting corruption, but people who understand the importance of making sure that the most important challenge facing our nation at this stage is to actually put the economy back on track.
Lastly, your organization recently revealed a report done by Contech that shows that business contributed 1.9 trillion to the country's GDP, employing 7 times more people than government. Can you tell us how you were able to achieve such results?
Basically, the point we're trying to make is to just make the public aware that business plays a very important role in the life of any country, particularly South Africa. So we're demonstrating that our companies, our members alone, let alone companies that are not our members, employ 1.2 million people in their companies. And those companies, those individuals also support another 2 million people or so. So we are a major contributor to jobs. So government or political parties can promise 1 million jobs, but the people who really create jobs is the private sector. So private sector is indeed an important lifeblood of any economy. So that's what the report was demonstrating.
That was BLSA Communications Director Themba Maseko speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about the SA recent downgrade.